Subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified about the highlights of India's smartest podcast, The Ranveer Show. This is TRS Clips. Coming back to history, sir, is there some kind of phase of history that I know you're totally into all forms of history, be it postmodern history, also modern history, whatever, medieval times. But let's end this particular history special, this mind-fucking history special, with maybe one section of what you take away the most as a historian, or what messes with your head the most.
Well, it's not any one particular thing. I like to look at history as from a big picture perspective. I like to look for patterns and the lessons we can draw from history. So there are a number of lessons we can draw from history. Like, for example, empires always crumble. Nations always crumble eventually. Civilizations and dynasties crumble. The Cholas lasted for 1500 years, but they also crumbled someday. And it's always because of poor succession. It's always because of lack of leadership.
Yeah, this whole thing about tough times build hard men build easy times build soft men, and soft men build hard times.
Exactly. It's a cyclical process, and that's something you see over and over and over again in history. So there are many timeless lessons that you can draw out of history. So that is what I look for. I look for the wisdom that you, and that actually applies in geopolitics today, you know. I mean, if you understand history, you're bound to understand geopolitics. So these are the things that I look for.
Yeah, I think something that I read around the time I first spoke to you, around the time we hosted you in this very room for the first time, was the nature of national borders. A great example of the softness of national borders would be Pakistan occupied Kashmir, POK. On any map of India that we study in Indian schools, India is drawn in a certain way, where POK is drawn as a part of India. In any map of Pakistan that is in Pakistani textbooks in their schools, POK is shown as a part of Pakistan. In the same way, I'm dead sure China and Chinese schools have their own maps. For all you know, North Korean schools have their own maps. What are borders at the end of the day? They are just man-made lines. It also brings me to the concept of nationalism and patriotism. I'm deeply patriotic towards my own culture, towards what this landmass called the Indian subcontinent, and not just India, has seen over the centuries, over the millennia, that we've seen so much. And that's what I'm patriotic towards. I love what my people stand for, what's in my people's hearts. But purely in terms of these false lines that were drawn out by Britishers, I question that, is this really my country? That's what kind of bothers me, because I've also read that borders are constantly drawn, redrawn, broken. I've heard people like yourself who study geopolitics so much. Even I think Major Gaurav Arya echoed this thought that maybe in 20 years, there might be a reunion of India and Pakistan. These weird, groundbreaking concepts. And it sounds crazy, but we've been India and Pakistan for what? 75 years?
That's it.
Less than 100 years. Before that was one country. It was one country for how long? Millennia. We were one culture. So does that mean that we're going to become one country again? Does it mean that Afghanistan might join the super country that we create? What will our cricket team be like? What will the country be like? That's what fascinates me. What do you have to say about that, sir?
What I have to say is that countries, the nation state concept, it's a very recent concept. It's an artificial concept that came out of European imperialism and the desire to divide up populations for the benefit of the elite, of the royalty. But if you look at the past 10,000 years of history, it's always been kingdoms and empires and dynasties. And today we are seeing a reversal to that sort of system slowly. If you look at China, it's again an imperial system. You can call Mr. Xi Jinping the president, but he's actually the emperor. Again, Mr. Putin, you can call him the president, but he's actually the Tsar of Russia. So we are slowly seeing a gradual reverting to that sort of system in certain parts of the world. So this nation state concept is a colonial European concept. It's not something that has been prevalent throughout history for thousands of years. And I suspect that within 50 to 100 years, we may be back to an imperial or a dynastic system in many parts of the world. And then India could become a civilization state, not a nation state. And then you could see a reunification based on the kind of leadership we have in our region.
I think it's a great emotion to have love for your flag. love for your country, love for your people. But what's also important to know and to be informed about, and this is something that only geopolitical observers and historians kind of have access to, it's a radical thought that might even get people into trouble for voicing it out. But it is important to know that the concept of patriotism, feeling patriotic only for this landmass in those man-made borders, that's a wrong form of patriotism fundamentally. Feel patriotic for your culture, feel patriotic towards your own people, your own community. But if you just say, I'm only patriotic to this landmass, it's fundamentally wrong as a human being, because this form of patriotism is a tool created by higher ups, people up on the political ladder, in order to control mass thought. They put it in our textbooks that you need to feel good towards this landmass and you need to feel hate towards that country and those people. That's a wrong mentality. Patriotism is supposed to be felt towards your culture and towards your own history and towards your own thought process, not towards just a landmass, and especially not towards an ideology that breeds hate against any form of people. If anything you're taught since childhood breeds hate towards other human beings, I feel like that's not correct.
I completely echo what you're saying. Don't be a nationalist, be a civilizationist.
Yeah.
That's what matters. It's about serving a higher purpose, a higher ideal, something bigger and older and larger than yourself. It's about being one link in a very long chain. We are part of a chain that goes back maybe 100,000 years, or if not much more before that. And we would like it to continue another 100,000 years. So we have to all do our part. We are here for a brief amount of time. We are living through a bad time. I think it's always been a bad time in some way or the other, right? The good times are very few and far between, actually, when the whole nation is unified as a civilization and all that. So we are currently fragmented, but having a love only for a certain piece of land is extremely materialistic and very narrow-minded.
Also, if these so-called positive emotions like this form of patriotism breed negativity within you, you need to understand you're being controlled by some external forces that are creating that negativity within you. All forms of these mass thought processes, be it intense religious beliefs or intense nationalist beliefs, which create hate towards other human beings, hate towards other tangents of thought, is actually a form of control. You've become a sort of mental zombie. And you need to unzombie yourself and see the world and see history and see geopolitics from a larger perspective. Why am I feeling hate towards those people? Why am I feeling hate towards that country? Why can't I just feel love towards them? Why can't I hate the problem and not those people? Why can't I hate the problem and not that country? But again, this is going to take years because the country as a whole is taught to kind of have patriotism only towards those borders and this landmass.
We need the right leaders. We need the right people to show us the right way. And the thing is complicated by the fact that the other country, even if you may love them, they may not want to love you back. So it's going to take time from both sides for things to change. But you are absolutely right. Just loving one piece of land is essentially being controlled by certain forces who are teaching you to think in certain patterns. And you don't want that. You want to be able to think beyond any boxes that you are put inside. And that is all about. So it's about you need to love your people, your culture. It doesn't mean you have to hate others.
Yeah.
That is the main thing I would like to say.
I want to highlight Baha'ism. Have you heard of Baha'ism?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So Baha'ism is a modern day spiritual thought process, which some people would consider religion. And the spiritual thought process or the religion says that in a Baha'i church or in a Baha'i temple, you have to go and follow Islam, follow Hinduism, follow Christianity. Whatever you've always been following all your life, you have to keep following those practices. You're free to do the form of prayer that you believe in with a sense of love towards all the other faiths and respect towards all the other faiths. Don't think that you are above anyone else. We're all human beings. And if any thought, any belief, any system that you've grown up with is creating hate within you, understand it's first going to affect yourself. Because what are we at the end of the day? Before even being an Indian, we're human beings. There's no difference between the body structure of you versus the body structure of a Pakistani or the body structure of an Afghan or the body structure of an Iraqi or an American or a Britisher. We're all human beings at the end of the day. And if any of your thought processes is creating hate towards anyone else, any other country, that hate is going to return to you in your daily life in the form of some sort of mental trauma, in the form of some sort of mental aggression. It's not an easy form of living. So, in order to be kind to yourself in your daily life, in order to be better with your own mental health, remove the hate from your mind a little bit. Replace that with some sort of love. Replace that with some sort of compassion. And this is a sort of spiritual way of looking at it. But they say that Baha'ism is the future of the human race. That the whole world is going to follow one thought process, which is the thought process of love. Again, this is over 200, 300 years. But it echoes this geopolitical thought of fewer borders, fewer separations.
I think it will take time for something like this to catch on, because one of the major issues that confronts the world today is these impermeable borders. We are all confined within certain geographical borders, and you need permits and visas and passports to pass through, and you may not be given that. In the past, before this nation state system came in, there were no borders. You could just walk into another country, and if you looked reasonably okay and respectable, they would let you pass through. There was no such system of tight controls. So once you have these rigid borders, it becomes very easy to hate other people. But when you can just travel and walk into another country and pass through it, then you can see much more of the world. And this sort of attitude that this piece of land belongs to me and nobody else, and that doesn't belong to me and it belongs to them, that is what is creating, in my opinion, a great deal of hatred. It is the legacy of the colonial imperialistic system that we have seen in the past 200-300 years that is causing so much strife in the world, so much hatred.